Savings Institute, and Ali Fatemi of the American Graduate School here in Paris, American Graduate School of Business, I should say. Now, before the break, we talked about Europe's social democrats asking for more regulation. And then, across the Atlantic, there's the Occupy Wall Street movement, angry that the only reform instituted since the crisis appears to have been watered down under intense lobbying pressure. Ali Fatemi, we're hearing not just from anti-globalization militants, but from economists on this side of the Atlantic, that they get the sense that the last bailout plan for Greece, for instance, was written up with an eye to protecting the bankers. We know that one of the key points of disagreement between Nicolas Sarkozy and Angela Merkel is Sarkozy doesn't want the banks to take too much of a hit.
Well, if the banks lose money, it is the state that has to come to save them, because people's savings are in the bank, all the investment takes place of the bank. It's easy to go out there and blame the banks and this and that, but this is an important part of the economy, and it is not an institution that we can say we don't need it. To nationalize the banks, I mean, these are the kind of things that have been tried and have failed. Today's Wall Street Journal has a very good article about the French socialists, and I wish you would take a look at it. Essentially, it says that going the state way is no solution, and it criticizes...
But what about like a Swedish solution where you take shares in it for a while? If you're going to have to recapitalize, you're going to have to be some trade-off.
Well, then you're going to risk public money. You're going to risk taxpayers' money. The banks take a risk, and if they lose money, it is banks' money. But if the state loses money, it's taxpayers' money. What I'm saying is there are no shortcuts, there are no easy solutions. This problem has brewed over the years, and it's nothing that will go away with one or two meetings. Europe's problem will take years to be resolved, and there has to be the patience, there has to be the perseverance that is required to resolve this problem. And I think right now everybody's blaming the rating agencies. Fine, let's get rid of them. Let's kill the messenger. Is that going to help? No. The rating agencies are doing their job. They're doing their job because they get paid to evaluate the risk which investors are taking. And I think what we need really is a much more public education about these issues, rather than this short flip statements like it's the fault of the bankers, the Wall Street, the capitalists. This doesn't work. This is not going to solve any problem.
All right, I know it's a cliche, but every time we get into this discussion, one Hollywood movie always comes up in conversation.
Is in the greatest jungle of them all, Wall Street.
We're going down the drain, okay? The stock is plummeting. When it hits 18, buy it all.
Michael Douglas's character
I want you to fill out the missing
in the 1987 film Wall Street by Oliver Stone, Michael Douglas's character Gordon Gekko plays the junk bond dealer who says greed is good. Stéphane Cossé, if there was a remake, and we're about to go into a presidential election campaign in this country, if there was a remake, what kind of job description would you give to the bad guy?
Well, indeed, I believe that banks should take the hit. And in that example, yes,
back then it was a junk bond dealer.
Yes, but we're not talking about junk bonds in the sense of we're trying to rescue governments, and this is very serious because behind governments we have population, we have the Greek population, we have the European population, so we cannot joke too much about this. That being said, the hit was 21% as regards Greece, for example. Well, there is a consensus now that it should have been 50%. Well, so be it. But let's have also some transparency. We are told we need to recapitalize the bank. But why? We are told that if the hit is 50%, the banks can absorb it. So why do we need to recapitalize the bank? Jacques Delors yesterday in Le Monde was saying, well, either there is something fishy and we need to know it, or everything is fine. And why do we have the whole debate of recapitalizing the bank with our money, our taxpayer money? So we need explanation. We need the IMF to explain things more clearly. If there is a need to recapitalize the bank, is this because they plan that Spain and Italy are going to fail, are going to default. So all of that need to be more transparent.
René Defossé, there's the question of transparency. There's also the question of the banks are publicly traded. You have shareholders in them, most of the big banks. Can the boss of a bank tell the truth on this matter? Can the boss of the bank say, well, actually, we do need to be recapitalized?
I think the boss of the banks currently they say exactly the opposite. They do not need to recapitalize, and for I would say pretty good reasons. If the risk is Greece, if the risk is the slowdown of economic activity, which has a price obviously, which is a price obviously for banks as well, there is no need for recapitalization of banks. If you consider, for example, the French bank, if you consider German banks as well, they're all correctly capitalized right now. They do not need more money. Of course, if you envisage a very dramatic situation where Italy or Spain would default on their debt, of course, the situation would become a bit more complicated. But clearly, I think right now there is no need. The bank do not need to recapitalize, and as far as I'm concerned, I do not understand the IMF's position regarding this point. One has to bear in mind that the problem is not banks. The problem is the budget situation of the non-core countries within the euro area, and the problem to be fixed is this problem. As far as now,
it's not the problem of it's not the problem of the banks who lent them the money. It's only the problem of those who owe it.
Yeah, I do agree. But again, if you we talked about Greece a few minutes ago. I think clearly we have imagined a plan for Greece on July the 21st with a PSI where haircuts were at 21%. Clearly, this for me it was a joke. The 21%. Is not consistent with what we should do with the situation of Greece, which is clearly insolvent. So we have to accept the view that Greece is insolvent, and we have obviously to accept much more significant haircuts for Greece. But if you consider, for example, the price to pay for banks, if we make much more significant haircuts for Greece. France, for example, French banks own more or less 10 billion GGBs, Greek government bonds. If we have a haircut of 50%, they would lose 5 billion euro. This is very, very easily manageable. It's not a problem for banks. And again, at least so far, the only country right now in the eurozone which has a problem of solvency is Greece. So we should treat this problem separately from the other problems.
All right,
if we don't change it.
Yes?
Well, the problem is that Spain and Italy have a liquidity problem, but they're very close to insolvency. About the banks, we must understand one thing. Bankers gamble with your money and my money, not with their own. Before Basel II, banks' capital was 3%. Basel II said it should be 6%. If banks had to put up 10 or 15% capital, they would be much more careful with what they are doing. If I have your money, I can take much more risk with it. But if it's my own money, I'd be much more careful. I think if you're talking about banks, there should be worldwide intention of raising the capital of these banks. And besides that, I think at this stage, the more time is wasted and not accepting the facts about the fact that Greece cannot pay its debts. 6 months ago on this platform, if you remember, we talked about that. You have to accept the fact that they will never be able to pay. The sooner that they resolve this and allow an orderly default, the sooner the problem will be resolved.
All right, and Nicolas Sarkozy, as we mentioned at the top, is in Frankfurt. It wasn't scheduled officially. It's that goodbye due to honor the outgoing European Central Bank Chair Jean-Claude Trichet. It's also about a sit-down with Angela Merkel. Financial Times quoting the French president. as telling lawmakers from his ruling UMP Conservative Party that an unprecedented financial crisis will lead us to take important, very important decisions in the coming days. Le Monde quotes a presidential palace insider as saying, if Sarkozy has dramatized it all, it's because he believes a deal is at hand. But over in Berlin, the message is clearly not so fast.
The EU summit next Sunday is an important step, but further steps will follow because this is about overcoming a sovereign debt crisis. These sovereign debts have been built up over decades, and therefore one cannot resolve them with one summit, but it will take difficult, long-term work.
Didier Davidoff, let's talk politics here. Was Sarkozy right to sort of force Merkel's hand by saying we're going to come up with something this weekend?
Well, I would say that Angela Merkel also has its own internal political issue. She has a difficulty to convince the German citizens that they should pay somewhat to have the euro safe. And that's what is at stake today. And if everybody agrees that something should be done at a European level, then sooner is better than later.
All right, we can see the rest of Europe, of course, watching nervously whenever there's a tiff between the two nations that motor the core of the Eurozone, as depicted in this cartoon by Tom Janssen, cartoonist for the Amsterdam Daily Trove, where you see Merkel and Sarkozy taking the patient in opposite directions. And again, Stéphane Cossé, it comes back to the point you made at the outset about how what kind of a bargaining hand does the French president have when a credit rating agency says he's not on firm footing?
Yeah, Nicolas Sarkozy has little credibility, has little bargaining power. So what does it mean? It means that the solution has to come from Germany. Now, that being said, Germany is saying no to Eurobonds, is saying no to increase in EFSF, is saying no to many other solutions, is saying only fiscal discipline. I don't think that this is the right approach also.
So
Why?
Sarkozy was right to go public saying, hey, we have to come up with something.
Well, I don't know if he has to raise the stake that much. But all I know is that the growth in Germany is slowing down. Exports are significantly slowing down. Why? Because the euro area is in crisis. So helping the euro area is helping Germany. So Germany has to come with some solutions sooner rather than later. And of course, this has to be agreed with somehow the public opinion. But we have seen the Bundestag taking some decisions while the public opinion was not supporting that. I think this is history that is in the making, and Germany has to be right now at this position of taking historic decisions.
All right, so the ball definitely in Berlin's court. Already at last weekend's G20 Finance Summit, the boss of the IMF, she didn't see the glass as half full.
If anything, the situation is more likely to have worsened than to have improved over the last 3 weeks. And if markets have straightened up a bit in the last few days, certainly the overall economic situation has not improved. We heard loud and clear that the emerging markets in particular were very concerned about the risk of contagion from advanced economies to emerging markets and to low-income countries.
René de Fossé, you were saying how you felt the IMF had an ambiguous stance to all this. What did you mean exactly?
I think, as I said earlier, the problem, the primary problem in the euro area is the problem of the sovereign debt, the assets which pose a problem for the investors right now are the government bonds of the peripheral countries. Banks have improved dramatically over the previous years their situation in terms of capital. I think they do not need to make more effort as far as this point is concerned. I don't understand why a European bank and only a European bank would increase, for example, their core Tier 1 ratio to 9% right now, while the other banks in the world would not do that. This would be obviously very bad news for, of course, Eurozone banks, and it would be obviously very bad news for the economy of the Eurozone.
All right, so you're saying there is money out there. Before we go, because we're running a little short on time, a little proscriptum here. Again, the pretense for this meeting between Nicolas Sarkozy and Angela Merkel is the fact that there is this retirement, I guess you could call it a party or ceremony taking place in Frankfurt for the outgoing president of the European Central Bank. In all this crisis, Ali Fatemi, Jean-Claude Trichet, how will history, will it be kind to him, do you think?
Yes, I think it would be very positive. If I make one point about Mrs. Merkel has something much more greater to lose if the euro fails as money. That is the ultimate weapon. The Germans may grumble and be reluctant, but the alternative is losing the euro, and they're not going to.
So you agree with Stéphane
accept
Cossé, something may in fact happen over the weekend in Brussels.
Mark Twain said prediction is very difficult, especially if it's about the future.
And on the issue of Jean-Claude Trichet?
Well, I believe that he has done his best. I think he has outstepped the constitution of European Central Bank, and I'm pretty sure that his successor is going to be far more conservative.
Stéphane Cossé was able to sort of bend the rules a little bit.
I think Trichet has made one small mistake, which was to say that banks should not take the hit at the beginning of the crisis. But for the rest, I think that in the scale of European history, Jean-Claude Trichet should be quite high, very high, not quite close to Adenauer or Schuman when you will look at the whole history of the European community.
And just because we're almost out of time, Didier Davidoff, are you all concerned like Ali Fatemi is that his successor, being a little bit more conservative, a little more inflexible, may not be able to handle the coming crisis?
Well, sure, he has proved that although the European Central Bank has not put so low interest rate as the US, he has been able to be very pragmatic, and this is the history. This is what the history will judge, and it will be a positive judgment.
All right, we're going to leave it there. There's going to be a lot of news coming up in the build-up to that weekend summit. We'll, of course, be covering it here on France 24. I want to thank you, Didier Davidoff. I want to thank Stéphane Cossé, Ali Fatemi, and René Desfossés for joining us from London. Thank you, the viewers, for being with us here in the France 24 debate. And we'll get the latest out of Frankfurt in a moment with Marcus Carlson as he hosts our business segment.